name's Bob Howe. I was born in 1940 during the Second World War and lived in Canberra, the suburb of Reid, and it was very close to the airport. And in fact, on the east-west runway, aircraft such as Lockheed Hudson's used to fly over. And so I became a very devoted aircraft and aviation fan. I used to ride out to the airport a lot in my youth to see the aircraft out there. So I guess it was inevitable that I'd ended up joining the Air Force. 1956, I was in my final year at Canberra High School, and in conjunction with my family who agreed, I decided I'd try to apply to join the Royal Australian Air Force College because I was so familiar with a similar institution called Royal Military College here in Canberra at Duntroon. And I was surprised that I was accepted, and so I then joined RAAF College at Point Cook to start my year in 1957 as a young cadet. Point Cook, of course, is the home of the Air Force, and so I felt very much welcome in joining the Air Force at that time. I spent 4 years at Point Cook. Towards the end of the term, I tried out to be a pilot, but through circumstances, mainly psychological, I didn't make it. And so I ended up becoming a navigator, heading to East Sale in Victoria to do a course there at the School of Air Navigation. At the School of Air Navigation, it was quite a challenging course because there's a lot of technical knowledge required, and it meant doing lots of studies. So it was a 12-month course, and there was a fair bit of study involved, which included subjects such as meteorology, learning all about the weather, how to navigate in different aircraft. The training aircraft we used at Sale was a C-47 Dakota, and it was specially fitted out for navigation training. It could normally take 2 navigators with their navigation tables, and it had various instruments that were used for navigation. And so there were special aircraft that were flown by the School of Air Navigation. We not only travelled around locally in Victoria from Sale, but we also travelled around Australia as well, and learning our navigation skills with instructors in the aircraft with us as well. I graduated from the school and was posted up to Townsville, and my first squadron that I flew with was number 10 Squadron. When I arrived there, they were still flying the Lincoln bomber, and that was an advance on the Lancaster bomber from Second World War. And I flew quite a number of hours in the Lincoln, chasing submarines, and in my spare time chasing air hostesses as they arrived into Townsville, and ended up marrying one and lived for 60 happy years with her. She passed away last year. And then I was posted down to Melbourne to Point Cook, back to the college, which was then called the Academy, where I became an instructor there, instructing the cadets. My girlfriend at the time, who flew out of Brisbane with airline Trans-Australia Airlines, TAA, she then got herself posted down to Melbourne as well, and we ended up getting married in Melbourne with a bunch of cadets as our guard of honour. So that was quite a good RAAF wedding we had. RAAF Academy, I worked 64 to 67. Then I did an advanced navigation course following on from the basic navigation course that I originally did. And that was done in 1968. Then I was posted to the operational conversion unit number 1, which was at Amberley and was converting crews onto Canberra aircraft for bombing missions preparatory to going to Vietnam. So I spent a bit of time learning to fly in the Canberra and as a navigator and bomb aimer. We used to fly down at Evans Head bombing range and practice dropping bombs down there. Then I became an instructor on the OCU itself after doing the course. And so for the next year or so, I trained other people in bombing prior to going to Vietnam. My turn came to go to Vietnam in 1969. When I arrived at Amberley, I had not flown in the Canberra aircraft before. As I said earlier, I had flown in Lincolns and Neptunes and maritime world. And so I was unfamiliar with the bomber world. And it was quite a different environment. The Canberra itself was a very interesting aircraft. It was designed essentially to replace the Mosquito strike bomber used in the Second World War, and it was also a strike bomber itself. It was an uncomfortable aircraft. It didn't have much room for the crew. It was fairly crowded with a narrow fuselage, and we had to climb in through a door on the right-hand side of the aircraft, and the pilot would sit in the front on his own, and as a navigator, I would then move behind him amongst a number of different instruments, and there was an ejection seat that I sat in, and I would then strap into the ejection seat, and the two of us would then taxi out and take off and fly our missions. The Canberra trainer that we trained in, there were 3 or 4 of them, and they'd all come out from England. And they contained 2 seats for the pilots and 1 for the navigator. And so it was slightly different. The interesting thing about the trainer, which was called the T-21, was that the navigator could not eject from the aircraft, only the pilots. So if something went wrong, out would go the 2 pilots, and the poor old navigator would go down with the aircraft. The bomber, though, was quite nice because it had its own ejection seat, and so if something went wrong with the aircraft, I could eject out quite safely and leave the pilot to his fate. So they were quite different. To bomb in the Canberra aircraft, we had a clear plastic nose where we had a bomb site located. So what would happen is that the pilot would fly to the target area or down to the range at Evans Head, and I would unstrap from my ejection seat and crawl down a passageway beside the pilot to lie on my stomach and being able to operate the bomb site. One feature about the bomber that we had in Vietnam, we were very scared about lying down on our stomachs with our privates exposed to any fire which might come up from the enemy. So we actually had a slab of almost concrete, I think it was, placed on the front of the aircraft, which we could lie on, so for our own safety. So that was quite an interesting feature. It was probably not concrete, but I've forgotten what it was made of. But it was to protect ourselves. The bomb site itself was essentially an old-fashioned bomb site, similar to the ones used in the Lancaster bombers back in World War II. So there's not much difference. We did have a Doppler radar system fitted into the aircraft, which sent signals down to the ground and returned them. And by that method, we could actually measure our speed and our drift as we moved along over the Earth. And so consequently, those signals could be fed into the bomb site. And so we were able then to know our ground speed and drift, which we could then adjust and so on the bomb sight to make sure that it was properly calibrated and able to enable us to drop the bombs on the target. The bomb sight itself had a graticule crosshair illuminated onto a glass panel, and we could look through that and see and try and align that graticule or the crosshairs with the target as it came underneath the aircraft. The Canberra itself showed no further technical development from the Lancaster, as the Navigator or the bomb aimer would tell the pilot to go left or right, or change his sort of attitude as well. And so it was almost the same bombing system as used by the Lancasters in World War II. So there we were in the sort of 1960s, late 1960s, using the same technology.